My name is Brynn Calloway and I am 33 years old. 4 weeks ago, my mother called to invite me to my younger brother's Eagle Scout ceremony. The first time she had spoken my name in 6 years. And I said yes. Not because I had forgiven her. Not because I believed she had changed. I said yes because the ceremony was being held at the Pinecrest Community Center in Macon, Georgia, in front of 114 people, and because I had been carrying something in my coat pocket for 11 days that I needed to put down in a room full of witnesses. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 o'clock on a Saturday afternoon. My brother, Eli, was 17 years old. He had earned 21 merit badges, logged 437 hours of community service, and built a wheelchair-accessible garden path at the Whitfield Senior Center entirely on his own. He was the best thing that had ever come out of our family, and he had done it in spite of us, not because of us. My mother called it a milestone. She called it a family moment. She said, and I am quoting her exactly, "Brynn, we need you there." It would mean the world to Eli. She said it in the voice she used when she needed something from you, soft and certain at the same time, the voice that always made me feel like I was being handed a bill disguised as a gift. But here is what she did not know. 3 weeks before that phone call, Eli had driven 2 hours from Macon to Savannah, sat across from me at my kitchen table, and told me everything. Every conversation he had overheard. Every lie that had been told in his name. Every time my mother had used his ceremony, his achievement, his name, as a reason to put me in a room where I could be managed. He told me, and then he asked me to come anyway. Not for her. For him. And for the truth. Before I tell you what happened in that room, please take a moment to like and subscribe to this channel. It helps more than you know, and it means this story reaches the people who need to hear it. Drop your city and your local time in the comments. I love reading those, every single one. Now let me take you back to the beginning, to a town called Waverly, Georgia, and to the summer I was 19 years old and first understood that some people in your family will spend their whole lives deciding who you are allowed to be. Waverly, Georgia. Population 6,300 and change. One main street with a hardware store, a pharmacy, a diner called Lella's that smelled like biscuit grease and sweet tea no matter what time of day you walked in. We had a public library with a librarian named Miss Opal who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and kept a jar of peppermints on the circulation desk. We had a Baptist church, a Methodist church, and a Church of God that my grandmother attended every Sunday morning and Wednesday evening without exception. My father, Ray Calloway, drove a delivery truck for a regional grocery distributor for 28 years. He left the house at 4:30 in the morning and came home at 6 in the evening smelling like cardboard and diesel and the orange-scented hand soap he kept in the cab. He was a quiet man. Not cold, just economical with words, the way men are who spend their days alone in a truck cab with nothing but road and radio. He called me Brynny. He taught me to check the oil in a car before I was 12. He had a laugh that sounded like it surprised him every time. My mother, Sandra, was the kind of woman who ran things without ever appearing to run them. She chaired the church hospitality committee. She organized the school fundraiser every October. She knew everyone's business and distributed it selectively, like a pharmacist measuring doses. She was not a cruel woman in the way that word usually means. She did not yell. She did not hit. She operated through exclusion and omission, through the careful management of who was seen and who was not. I did not have a word for that when I was a child. I just knew that some mornings I woke up feeling invisible without knowing why. My brother Eli was born when I was 9 years old. He came out small and loud and immediately beloved. He had sandy hair and our father's laugh and a way of walking into a room that made people turn toward him without knowing they were doing it. I did not resent him for it. I want to be clear about that. Eli was the best version of what our family could produce, and I loved him with something that had no bottom to it. He was not the problem. He was never the problem. The problem was what happened in the space between us. The way my mother told the story of our family, Eli was the center and I was the context. Eli's science fair project got framed and hung in the hallway. My state academic bowl trophy sat on a shelf in the garage next to the lawn edger. Eli's baseball games were circled on the calendar in red marker. My debate team regionals were mentioned once, at dinner, and then the conversation moved on. I told myself it was the age gap. I told myself it was because I was older and more independent and did not need the same kind of attention. I told myself a lot of things that were easier than the truth. My grandmother, Celia Calloway, was my father's mother. She lived 12 minutes from us in a house that smelled like cedar and talcum powder and the particular sweetness of old hymnals. She had a garden in the backyard that she tended with the seriousness of someone who understood that living things require daily attention. She grew tomatoes, pole beans, 4 kinds of pepper, and a rose bush along the south fence that she had planted the year my father was born. She was 71 years old when I was 19, and she was the only person in my family who looked at me and saw what was actually there. Grandma Celia used to say, and I heard her say this more than once in different ways, "Brynny, the people who try to make you small are always working from fear. Don't let their fear become your ceiling." She said it the way she said most things, without drama, like a fact she was simply reporting. She had a way of handing you the truth without making you feel like you needed to be fixed. She also kept records. That was something I did not fully understand until I was older. She kept a wooden box, cedar, with brass hinges and a small brass latch, on the top shelf of her bedroom closet. I had seen it my whole childhood and never thought much about it. I found out what was inside it 11 years later. I will get to that. The summer I turned 19, I was accepted into the journalism program at the University of Georgia on a partial merit scholarship. I had worked for it. 4 years of honor roll, 2 years on the school newspaper, a summer internship at the Waverly Gazette where I wrote obits and police blotter entries and one feature story about the county's oldest working farm that the editor told me was the best piece of writing that had come across his desk in 3 years. I was not arrogant about it. I was just certain that words were the thing I was supposed to do with my life. My mother's response, when I told her, was to smile and say, "That's wonderful, sweetheart," and then, 4 days later, to sit me down at the kitchen table and explain that the family could not help with the remaining tuition balance. $11,000 a year. She said it with genuine sounding regret. She said they had already committed to Eli's college savings fund and that with Dad's truck routes being cut back, the timing just wasn't right. She said maybe I could defer for a year. I did not cry. I sat at that kitchen table and I nodded and I said I understood. I was 19 years old and I did not yet have the vocabulary for what I was watching happen, but something in my chest went very still and very clear, the way it does when you understand something you cannot ununderstand. What I found out 3 years later, from my father, during one of the 2 honest conversations we ever had, was that my mother had not committed that money to Eli's college fund. There was no fund at that time. Eli was 10 years old. My mother had simply decided that journalism was not a practical degree and that if I wanted to pursue it badly enough, I would find a way to do it on my own. She had not told me that directly because that would have required a conversation she was not willing to have. She had given me a softer version of no and called it circumstances. I deferred for 1 semester, not 1 year. I took 2 jobs, mornings at the Waverly Gazette answering phones and afternoons at a print shop on Route 11, and I saved enough to cover the gap. I started at UGA in January instead of September. I graduated in 4 years. I did it without a single dollar from my parents, and I did not tell them that until after the fact. Not to punish them, because by then I had learned that some things are better built in private. I need to pause here for a moment, because I know some of you watching right now have been in that kitchen. Maybe it wasn't tuition. Maybe it was a job you wanted to take, or a person you wanted to love, or a version of yourself you were trying to become, and someone in your family decided for you, quietly, without giving you the real reason. If that is you, type the word ceiling in the comments. Because what I am about to tell you is about what happens when you refuse to live under someone else's ceiling. And I want you to know that you are not alone in this room. I graduated from UGA in December of 2013 with a degree in journalism and a job offer from a digital news organization in Savannah that covered state government and local policy. I was 23 years old and I had never worked harder for anything in my life, and I was proud of it in the particular way you are proud of something that nobody handed you. I called home to tell my parents. My mother said, "Savannah, that's far." My father said, "That's real good, Brynny." I moved to Savannah in January. The distance helped. I came home for Thanksgiving and Christmas the first 2 years, and those visits were manageable in the way that things are manageable when you have not yet named what is wrong. I sat at the table. I asked about Eli's school. I listened to my mother talk about the church committee and the neighbor's renovation and the price of groceries. I drove home to Savannah on Sunday afternoons feeling hollowed out in a way I could not explain to anyone. The break happened in the spring of 2016. I was 26 years old. I had been at the news organization for 3 years and I had just been promoted to senior reporter covering the state legislature. It was the first time my work had been recognized publicly in a way that had some weight to it. My editor sent a press release. The Waverly Gazette ran a small item, "Hometown woman named senior reporter." I sent my mother a copy. She did not call. She did not send a card. 3 weeks later, She forwarded me an email. It was from a woman named Donna Ferris, who was the mother of a boy Eli had gone to school with, and it was addressed to my mother. It said, "Sandra, I saw the piece in the Gazette about Brynn. You must be so proud." And my mother had forwarded it to me with a single line of her own at the top. "Thought you'd like to see this. No congratulations. No pride of her own." She forwarded me someone else's compliment the way you forward a coupon for a store you do not shop at. I stared at that email for a long time. I counted 17 seconds before I closed it. Then I opened a new document on my computer and I typed the date at the top. March 14th, 2016. And I started writing things down. I was not building a case. I was a journalist. Journalists write things down. It is what we do when we need to understand something. But over the following months, as I kept writing, I began to see a pattern that I had been too close to see before. Every milestone I had reached, my mother had found a way to redirect the attention. Every time I was in the room somehow became about something else. It was not dramatic. It was not loud. It was a slow, consistent draining, like a faucet left open that you do not notice until the tank is empty. The final break came in August of 2017. I was 27 years old. I had been dating a man named Cal for 2 years, a civil engineer who had grown up in Savannah and whose family was warm and loud and easy in a way I was still getting used to. I brought him home to meet my parents for the first time. My mother was gracious. She made her good pot roast. She asked Cal about his work. She smiled at all the right moments. And then, at the end of the visit, when Cal had stepped outside to take a phone call, my mother sat down across from me at the kitchen table, folded her hands, and said, "Brynn, I just want to make sure you're thinking about this carefully. You've always been the kind of person who moves fast." She paused. "I just wonder sometimes if you know what you want." She said it gently. She said it with what looked like concern. But I had been a journalist for 4 years by then, and I knew the difference between a question and a verdict. I said, "I know exactly what I want, Mom." She nodded and smiled and said, "Of course you do." And that was the last conversation we had for 6 years. I did not slam a door. I did not send a letter. I called my father 2 days later and told him quietly that I needed some distance, that I loved him, and that I would be in touch when I was ready. He said, "I understand, Brynny." His voice sounded like a man who had been expecting this call for a long time. I hung up and I sat in my kitchen in Savannah and I let myself feel the full weight of it for exactly 1 evening. Then I got up the next morning and went to work. Grandma Celia called me every Sunday for the first 2 years of the estrangement. She never asked me to reconcile. She never lobbied for my mother. She called because she wanted to know what I was reading, what I was working on, whether I was eating enough. She told me about her garden. She told me about the rose bush along the south fence. She told me once, in the particular way she had of saying the most important things in the most ordinary voice, "You don't have to explain yourself to people who have already decided what you are." She died in September of 2020. She was 79 years old. A stroke, fast, in the night. My father called me at 6 in the morning and I drove to Waverly in 2.5 hours. My mother was at the house when I arrived. We did not speak beyond what was necessary. I sat with my father in the living room for 3 hours. I helped arrange the service. I drove back to Savannah the day after the funeral. 2 weeks later, my father called. He said there was something I needed to know. He said Grandma Celia had left a cedar box for me, the one from the top shelf of her closet. He had found it with my name written on a piece of masking tape on the lid in her handwriting. He said he had not opened it. He drove it to Savannah himself, on a Tuesday, and handed it to me on my front porch. We stood there for a moment and he said, "She loved you the most, Brynny. I think you always knew that." Then he got back in his truck and drove home. I sat at my kitchen table with that box for 40 minutes before I opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten on Celia's blue stationery, dated January 3, 2019. Beside the letter was a document, 8 pages, stapled, with the seal of a Macon law firm in the upper left corner. And beside the document was a photograph I had never seen, me and Grandma Celia in her garden. I must have been about 11, holding a tomato the size of a softball, both of us laughing at something outside the frame. The letter said this. It said she had watched for a long time. It said she had seen the way the family told its story and who got left out of the telling. It said she had wanted to do something about it while she was alive and that she had done what she could, but that some things needed to wait until she was gone. She said, "Brynny, you are not the context. You were always the story." She said she loved me and that she was proud and that she hoped I would use what she was leaving me not to settle a score, but to stand in a room without apologizing for being in it. The document was a trust. Established in 2017, the same year I had gone quiet. Grandma Celia had transferred the deed to her house on Sycamore Lane in Waverly into a revocable trust, with me as the sole beneficiary. The house was assessed at $214,000. There was also a savings account, held in the trust, with a balance of $41,600. She had been saving for 30 years, a little each month from her pension and her garden club earnings and whatever small amounts she could put aside. She had never told my father. She had never told my mother. She had told her attorney and she had told the document. I held that letter for a long time. My hands did not shake. I noticed that. I did not tell anyone about the trust for 4 years. I paid the property taxes each year from Savannah. I had the house cleaned and maintained through a property management company in Waverly. I kept the rose bush along the south fence watered by arrangement with a neighbor. I kept the cedar box in the bottom drawer of my desk, next to my working notebooks. In those 4 years, I built something of my own. I left the news organization in 2021 and started a small communications consultancy, writing long-form investigative pieces on contract and advising nonprofits on their public communications. It was not glamorous. It was mine. By the time my mother called in the spring of 2023, I had 4 steady clients, a small office in downtown Savannah, and a reputation in the state nonprofit community that I had built one honest sentence at a time. Eli called me first, actually. 3 weeks before my mother's call. He drove down from Macon on a Saturday morning and sat across from me at my kitchen table the way my father used to sit, hands flat, back straight. He was 17 years old and he looked like our father, and he spoke like someone who had been thinking carefully about what he needed to say. He told me that my mother had been telling people, for 6 years, that the reason I had cut off the family was that I was jealous of him. That I had always resented his success. That I had walked away because I could not stand to watch him thrive. He had believed it, he said, for a long time, because it was the only explanation he had been given, and he was 11 years old when it started. But in the past year, he had started asking questions. He had talked to our father. He had found some of the old emails. He had begun to understand the shape of the thing. He said, "I need you to know that I don't believe that anymore. And I need you to know that whatever happened between you and Mom, it wasn't because of me." He said it with the steadiness of someone who had practiced it. I told him I knew. I told him it was never about him, not for a single day. He nodded. Then he asked me to come to his Eagle Scout ceremony. He said he wanted me in that room. He said there were people there who needed to see me stand up straight. I said yes. I asked him one question. I said, "Does Mom know you came here?" He said, "No." I said, "Okay." Then I made a phone call to the law firm in Macon whose seal I had memorized from 3 years of property tax correspondence. I want to pause here for a moment, because I know some of you have a sibling in this story. Not the villain. The one in the middle. The one who was used as a reason or a prop or an explanation for someone else's behavior. The one who grew up inside the same story but was told a different version of it. If you have a sibling like that, or if you were that sibling, type "I see you" in the comments. Because Eli did not owe me that drive to Savannah. He did not owe me that conversation. He chose it. And that choice meant more to me than anything that happened in the weeks that followed. Now, back to the story. My mother called on a Tuesday evening. I was at my desk reviewing a grant proposal for a client when my phone lit up with her number. I had not deleted it. I had kept it in my contacts for 6 years, the way you keep a piece of documentation, not because you plan to use it, but because you might need to reference it someday. She said, "Brynn, it's Mom." As though I might not know. She said Eli's ceremony was in 3 weeks and that it would mean so much to him if I could be there. She said she hoped enough time had passed that we could put things behind us. She said, "I know we haven't always seen eye to eye, but this is about Eli." She did not apologize. She did not ask what had happened from my side. She offered me an occasion and called it an olive branch. I said I would come. I said I was glad for Eli. I kept my voice even and warm, and I gave her nothing to hold on to. After I hung up, I sat very still for about 40 seconds. Then I opened the bottom drawer of my desk and I took out the cedar box. I also made 3 phone calls that week. one to my attorney in Savannah, one to the law firm in Macon, one to my father, who I had stayed in quiet contact with over the years through brief calls and occasional visits that my mother did not know about. My father said, "You're sure you want to do this?" I said, "I'm sure." He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "I'll be there. I'll be right there." The Pinecrest Community Center in Macon was a wide, one-story building with a polished gymnasium floor and a stage at the far end with a podium and a row of folding chairs. When I arrived at 1:45 on a Saturday afternoon, the parking lot was already full. I wore a navy blazer and a cream blouse and the small gold earrings my grandmother had given me when I graduated college. I carried a leather portfolio the color of dark honey. Inside, the room was arranged in rows of chairs facing the stage. The front 3 rows were reserved. I found my name on a card in the 4th row, between 2 people I did not recognize. My mother had assigned the seating. I noted that. I sat down. My mother was near the front, talking to another woman in a purple blazer. She saw me come in. She gave me a wave that was calibrated to look warm from a distance. My father was seated 2 rows ahead of me. He turned when I sat down, found my eyes, and nodded once. He looked older than the last time I had seen him in person. His hair was fully gray now. He had the same straight back, the same quiet hands. Eli was backstage. I knew because I had texted him when I pulled into the parking lot. He texted back a single word. "Ready." The ceremony began at 2 o'clock. The troop leader, a man named Mr. Hargrove, opened with remarks about the history of the Eagle Scout Award, about the character it required, about the young men who had earned it in this troop over the past 20 years. He spoke for 12 minutes. Then he introduced a series of speakers, a county commissioner, a representative from the senior center where Eli had built the garden path, a teacher from his school. Then my mother stood up. She had not been on the printed program. I had checked the program when I sat down, read every name, every time slot. She was not listed. She walked to the podium anyway, the way she walked into every room she had decided she owned, smoothly, without hesitation, in a cream blazer and pearl earrings. She tapped the microphone once and smiled at the room. She said she was Eli's mother and that she wanted to say a few words about the family that had raised him. She said Eli had grown up watching the people around him work hard and give back. She talked about my father's years on the road. She talked about her own work with the church committee. She talked about the values she had tried to instill. She spoke for 4 minutes. She mentioned Eli's name 6 times. She mentioned my name 0 times. Then she said something that I had been half expecting and half hoping I was wrong about. She said, "Eli has always been the heart of this family. He's the one who kept us together through some hard years." She paused for exactly the right amount of time. Some of you know our family has had its challenges. But Eli's dedication to service has been a reminder to all of us of what really matters. She looked out at the room with the expression of a woman delivering a testimony. Family is everything. And I am so grateful that today, we are all here together. She looked at me when she said it. Not for long. Just a flicker. The kind of look that says, I see you, and I am defining you before you can define yourself. She sat down. The room applauded. 114 people who did not know the full story applauded a woman who had just used her son's achievement to write a public narrative in which she was the steadfast center and the family's difficulties were an abstraction that had been healed by her son's goodness. She had not named me as the source of the difficulties. She had not needed to. She had simply gestured at the shape of them and let the room fill in the blank. I did not move. I did not look away. My hands were in my lap and they were perfectly still, and I noticed that. Eli came to the stage. He received his Eagle Scout Award from Mr. Hargrove. He shook hands with the county commissioner. He stood at the podium and gave a short speech that was thoughtful and specific and more honest than anything else said in that room that afternoon. He thanked his troop. He thanked his teachers. He thanked his father, by name, for every early morning drive to a service project. He looked at me in the fourth row and said, and I want to thank my sister Brynn, who taught me that the most important thing you can build is something that lasts after you're gone. He said it clearly, without hesitation, into a microphone in front of 114 people. 3 people in the front rows turned to look at me. My mother did not turn around. After the ceremony, there was a reception in the adjoining room. Folding tables with punch and sheet cake and small sandwiches. People moved and clustered and congratulated Eli, who stood near the door accepting handshakes with the same unhurried grace he had always had. I got a glass of punch and I stood near the east wall and I waited. My mother came to me within 7 minutes. She had the smile on, the one that looked like warmth from a distance. She said, Brynn, I'm so glad you came. She reached out and touched my arm, briefly, the way you touch something you are not sure is stable. She said, I meant what I said up there. It's good to have the family together. She said it as though the 6 years of silence had been a weather event that had simply passed. I said, I know you meant it. I said it quietly. I did not smile and I did not look away. I opened the leather portfolio in my hands. I said, Mom, I want to share something with you. I think it's better to do it here, where there are people around, because I want there to be witnesses to this conversation. I said it in the same tone I used when I was presenting a story to an editor. Calm, specific, factual. She blinked. The smile stayed, but something behind it shifted. She said, What is this about? I said, This is about Grandma Celia's house on Sycamore Lane. I had done my research. 3 weeks before the ceremony, I had learned through a contact at the Waverly County Assessor's Office that my mother had filed a petition with the county to have the property reassessed in preparation for a potential sale. She had filed it under her own name, claiming to be the property's administrator. The house, of course, was not hers to administer. It had been in a trust with my name on it for 6 years. But she did not know that. She had assumed, because no one had told her otherwise, that Grandma Celia had died intestate, that the house had passed to my father as next of kin, and that by extension she had some claim to it. She had also, I had learned from my attorney, made preliminary contact with a real estate agent in Waverly about listing the property. She had described herself in that conversation as the executor of the estate. My mother's expression did not change immediately. She said, "What about it?" I took a single document from the portfolio. Not the full trust, just the cover page, with the law firm's seal and the trust name and the date of establishment and the name of the sole beneficiary. I held it at an angle she could read without me handing it to her. I said, "Grandma Celia established a trust in January of 2017. The house and everything in it transferred into that trust at that time. I have been the sole beneficiary for 6 years." I said it at a normal conversational volume. The woman in the purple blazer was standing 4 feet away. 2 of Eli's troop leaders were within earshot. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. My mother looked at the document. She looked at it for 11 seconds. I counted. Then she said, "That's not possible." She would have told us. Her voice was still controlled, but something underneath it was moving. I said, "She told her attorney. She told the document." I paused. "She also left me a letter. I won't read it here, but I want you to know it exists and that it is specific." My mother said, "Brynn, this is not the time or place for this." I said, "I agree that it's not the ideal setting. But you chose the setting when you filed that petition last month." I kept my voice level. "I'm not here to take anything from you. I'm here because Eli asked me to come, and because I wanted you to know, in a place where it could not be disputed later, that the house belongs to me and that any further action on the petition will require you to respond to the trust's attorney." She said, "You would do this here? At your brother's ceremony?" I said, "I didn't file a petition to sell a dead woman's house, Mom." I said it without heat. Just the fact of it, placed on the table between us. She looked at me for a long moment. Her jaw was set. Her hands were clasped in front of her, the same posture she used at the church committee table when a vote was not going her way. She said, "I don't know what she told you in that letter, but your grandmother was not well at the end." I said, "She was well enough to establish a legal trust with a licensed attorney in January of 2017. The document has been reviewed by 2 attorneys since her death. It is airtight." I closed the portfolio. "I'm not asking you to agree with me. I'm informing you of a legal reality." She said, "This is not what family does." I said, "I know. I've been thinking about that for 6 years." My father had crossed the room without my noticing. He was standing just behind my mother's left shoulder. He had heard most of it. His face was very still. He looked at my mother and then at me and he said, quietly, "She's right, Sandra. Mom set it up herself. I found out last year." He said it without accusation. Just the fact, the same way I had said mine. My mother turned to look at him. Something passed across her face that I had never seen there before. Not anger, not grief exactly, but the particular expression of a person who has just discovered that the room they thought they controlled had more doors than they knew about. She did not say anything else to me that afternoon. She moved away toward the punch table. She spoke to other guests. She maintained the smile. She was very good at maintaining the smile. Eli found me near the east wall 20 minutes later. He had a piece of sheet cake on a paper plate and he handed it to me without a word and stood next to me, and we watched the room together for a while. Then he said, "She'll be okay." I said, "I know." He said, "I'm not sure she will, actually." But I wanted to say something hopeful. I laughed. It surprised me, the way my father's laugh used to surprise him. Eli grinned. He said, "I'm really glad you came." I said, "Me too." I drove back to Savannah that evening. The sun was going down over the marshes outside the city, that particular low-country gold that turns everything amber for about 20 minutes before the dark comes. I drove with the windows down and the radio off, and I let myself sit inside the quiet of it. My mother withdrew the petition the following week. My attorney confirmed it in a brief email on a Thursday morning. No letter, no call, no explanation. Just the withdrawal, filed and processed. I noted the date. I did not add it to any document. Some things do not need to be filed. Some things you just let be what they are. My father called me the following Sunday. He said he was sorry. Not for one specific thing, but in the way that people are sorry when they have been watching something happen for a long time and did not find the words until it was almost too late. He said, "I should have said something years ago, Brynny." I knew what was happening and I told myself it wasn't my place to get in the middle of it. He said, "That was wrong." I know that now. I told him I loved him. I told him I was glad he had driven that cedar box to Savannah himself. He said, "She would have wanted you to have it long before that." I said, "I know. But I had it when I needed it." My mother has not called since the ceremony. I do not expect her to, not soon, and I have made my peace with that. There are people who apologize because they are sorry, and there are people who apologize because they need something from you, and there are people who do neither because the architecture of their self-understanding does not have room for it. I am not angry at my mother. I am not waiting for her. I have stopped building my life around the space where her acknowledgement was supposed to go. Eli and I talk every week now. He started college in the fall, pre-law, which surprised no one who had ever watched him argue a point. He calls on Sunday evenings and we talk for an hour about everything and nothing, about his classes and my clients and what he is reading and what I am writing. He is the best thing that came out of our family, and he knows now, clearly, without any ambiguity, that I have always believed that. Grandma Celia's house on Sycamore Lane is still standing. The rose bush along the south fence bloomed again this spring. The property management company sent me a photograph. I have it on my phone and I look at it sometimes, that particular deep red against the white fence, and I think about a woman who kept a cedar box on the top shelf of her closet for years and never said a word about it. Who understood that the most powerful thing you can do for someone is prepare something for them before they know they will need it? Who wrote me a letter that said, "You were always the story," and meant every word? I kept the house. I am not sure yet what I will do with it. Some mornings I think I will move back to Waverly eventually, when my work allows it, and tend that garden the way she did, with the seriousness of someone who understands that living things require daily attention. Some mornings I think I will keep it exactly as it is, a place with my name on the deed and a rose bush along the south fence and a neighbor who waters it when I cannot get there myself. Either way, it is mine. She made sure of that. If you are watching this and you recognize something in it, the forwarded email, the kitchen table conversation, the ceremony where someone told the story of your family and left you out of it, I want you to know that the leaving out is not the truth. It is just the version they preferred. The truth is what you know about yourself when you are alone in a car with the windows down and the radio off and the light is going gold over the water. You do not have to perform your worth for people who have already decided what you are. You do not have to explain your silence or justify your distance or apologize for building something in the years when they were not watching. The building is the answer. The building was always the answer. Drop a comment below and tell me where you are watching from tonight. Tell me what time it is where you are. And if this story found you at the right moment, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.